So, welcome to Security Hot Takes from Sam and Jacob.
Jacob and Sam.
This is Jacob and Sam. This is our new segment, which will run about 20 minutes that we'll be publishing every other week. We have 3 subjects today. Sam, you want to rattle them off?
Yeah, we're going to talk about negative trust, encryptionless ransomware, and the SEC, who have seemed to be trying to make progress on how long it should take to have something they're calling a material disclosure, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Welcome to the episode of We're Not Lawyers.
Or doctors.
But take our advice anyway. Have you written anything or been asked to write anything on the new SEC rule yet?
No, except in Signal with you. No. We were messaging back and forth, but no, I who did I see who'd written something recently that was actually pretty good? Brian Hogley wrote something. I saw him right after it happened. But
I like.
But no, I haven't been tempted to. No.
Yeah, I did because it hasn't published yet, but I will on my corporate blog, and I defanged it a little bit because it's on my.
Ooh, put the fangs back in. Put the fangs back in.
But for this form, I get.
Let's get juicy.
So I don't know if you've seen what the general social media seems to be praising the SEC ruling, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but it seems to be our hero and savior SEC has come and made the CISO important is sort of the vibe I get from a lot of the
I need some regulators telling me I matter. Yeah.
But do you get that vibe too?
I've been waiting for it for a long time. I think that the thing everyone was waiting for was to hear that cyber skills would be required on boards, was what everyone was wanting to hear. And I think that's a little bit too aspirational. I think it's much more likely that rather than dedicated cyber skills, that people will be encouraged to either have on access cyber and to pay attention to cyber, or to have people among their toolkits to have cyber. Our old CFO, Russ Stein, who's a great guy, he blew me away when he asked, "Hey, you think I can get a CISSP?" Whoa. And then
Russ
actually he could. Russ could do it.
Definitely.
He's smart enough. He's smarty pants enough. He could do it.
Yeah, because it's a study exam more than a.
Well, I actually think he's smart enough to be a cyber person, and he could pass any test he put his mind to. Right.
Right. Exactly. That's what my thinking. So here's my take on the ruling that has fangs. One, I think most people are misinterpreting it as a cybersecurity rule, like as in it is intended to drive cybersecurity outcomes. The intent is not to drive cybersecurity outcomes. It's to protect shareholders from companies, from making bad decisions around companies that have a high liability from cyber risk.
Yep.
And the big difference there is in the rulings, it doesn't say you have to do this. You have to have a third-party risk program. You have to implement an incident response program. And there's 2 things that you have to sort of do. One is you have to tell people in your yearly filings what type of cyber risk program you have. You can say, I do none. And you can also say, I do not have cyber expertise on my board. That's acceptable.
Yep.
As long as you're actually saying
for now,
accurate for now. But this is what the ruling is. And secondarily, the other big part that people are discussing is that you have to disclose any cyber incident within 4 days of it occurring.
This is how it all starts, by the way.
But what the language says is any material cyber incident. And they cite about 3 cases as their reference case law. None of them are cyber law that I saw. I might have missed one, but they're all just general fiduciary responsibility case sightings. So like, for example, the most recent one was from 2011. One the case sightings, it goes back to 76, I think. So you're telling me that we're making a reasonable precedent on what material damages from security threats are based on a ruling from 1970 something. Now, anyway, so that's going to be up for interpretation. Yeah. If I am a lawyer whose sole intent is to make a soulless interpretation that protects the company,
right,
as conservatively as possible, I'm going to fight what that material. Like, we don't have to disclose this breach. There is nothing material here that an average shareholder would feel would change their decision on investing in our company, because that's what it's intended to do. So here's my fangs of
here
why
it comes. Bring it.
Yeah. And I don't actually believe this, by the way, but it's just a sort of controversial opinion that popped into my head.
Let's see if we believe it. Let's pass the test. Let's put it through the test rather.
If you're an actual sort of bad person and you look at this, you can essentially say, let's do less security monitoring because then we have no evidence to determine that there's been a material breach.
Absolutely. That's the plausible deniability. Like, absent more specificity, that's the only thing that people can do, really.
Right. And then let's say you do no security monitoring. Let's take this to the extreme. You do no cybersecurity monitoring. And it's leaked that some of your customers' data is on the internet. You then go and file your mandatory disclosure of breach because you now have material evidence.
Yep.
Because it got on. So you don't have to technically do it until that occurs if you're not doing security monitoring because you had no evidence of a material breach.
Well, the word material is the weasel word. And of course,
right.
I mean, yes, we are common law, of course, but this isn't law. This is regulation. It will still get tried. Jurisprudence of a sort is needed. But what's going to happen is people are going to argue about that. And because they had the first part, people are going to say, well, we met that requirement. And so as long as we meet that requirement, we're good. And everyone will say, this is what happens with all regulations. Something's not done.
Right, and so, not specific to cyber.
So a rule comes out and everyone says, oh, I'm going to use the male term here, grandfather. I'm going to be grandfathered out of it. Doesn't apply to me. Lots of reasons that doesn't work anymore. So then the next thing that happens is that goes away and then specificity goes up. Oh, we didn't get specific enough. Let's get more specific. Yeah. And then fines go up. And then those two ratchets just keep cranking. And we saw this with PCI. We saw it with FFIEC. We saw it with HIPAA. I mean, the original fines for HIPAA were $5,000, then $25,000. Eventually they went up millions.
But HIPAA is a law. PCI is a contractual obligation.
True, but they follow similar patterns and they actually borrow language from each other. Like they actually borrow the phrasings. And so things that get regulated or legal or turned into law later tend to happen faster and borrow the language from earlier.
Right. You can copy and paste.
And unless
now it applies to this too.
And unless you solve the root problem, they just keep turning it tighter and tighter and tighter. But the pattern has been like, if I don't know about it, I literally had a CISO tell me this before FFIEC got specific back in 2002 on Wall Street. He said, if I don't know about it, I don't have to deal with it. That was the CISO. And nobody did this thing to help out CISOs in the security department. You're spot on. They did this just to help shareholders to some degree.
It says it directly in the rule of law.
But where's the determination of material happen? Is it the incident responder? Is it the security person, the security executive? Is it the CISO? Is it when they go to the legal counsel? Is it when it gets put into a document and then becomes a material as a document and is sent to the board? Like
right.
in the audit committee. Like these are not
outside of. I think it's in between the lines. Obviously, the officers of the company are the ones liable for it. But does that mean if the officers were never informed by an incident responder that there was potential material damages, is that negligence or is that?
Well, negligence, right? I come back to it is so hard. It's easy post facto. Like there seems to be this belief that somewhere in the security department, picture it down in the basement, floor minus
it's always
42.
In the basement. It's always in the basement.
There's a screen and it's green. And then one day it goes red and everyone looks at you and goes, do we tell them? Like as if it was just binary, just boom, now we're done. First of all, there is no screen that goes green to red. There's this fog of war. Everything is very foggy in level minus 42 and human beings aren't generally down there, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere up above, there are several layers of interpretation. Was that?
Human beings? Said you don't consider SOC analysts human beings?
Yeah, not really. I mean...
yeah, that's a joke, by the way.
That was a total joke. Actually, you know what? Comment away because that'll be fun. But everybody should know that I actually
Sam has done some really great things for SOCs over the years. And
SOC analysts. Some of my best friends are SOC analysts.
Yes. Anyway, sorry to interrupt the train of thought to totally derail this.
So back to this. So somewhere someone's got to make the decision it's material, and that's not a correlation rule, and that's not one of those fangled AIs that people are talking about, and there's no lawyers level negative 42. That's just not happening. And, most CISOs have been in grade long enough that there's a bit of a translation that happens between the incident triage and the CISO, and then the CISO and the audit committee and the board, et cetera. So there's a whole lot of what that's going to happen here, but that's going to get worked out to some degree. But there's also a lot of fear in our community, by which I mean the security community, of the negligence word, right? This is terrifying. There's fear that people can go to prison over this. And there's been cases recently of people being,
was it Drizzle CISO and Uber CISO?
Uber CISO who, well, let's be fair.
Drizzle
Joe was a lawyer. Joe Sullivan was a lawyer, and he lied to the FBI. If you read it carefully, and folks can go look at this, and he knew what he was doing. And it's much more convoluted than just he was being taken to court over how he did his job. There's much more to it. And so I would recommend people read it before they go, oh my God, we can go to prison now. Anyone can go to prison over anything if they break the law. And civil court can hold you liable if you do something that damages someone. That's not that groundbreaking a case. So I just want people to really look at it before they claim that. So first of all, I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer either, right, Jacob?
No, I am not a lawyer, by the way.
I love lawyers.
Not legal advice.
They help me understand the law. I don't do my own law. I don't do my own brain surgery. Put those two things right out there. But this is actually fairly significant because it's the start of the escalation, right? Regulation ratchets it up because there's a problem, and there is a problem. And then we start to move forward, hopefully. It isn't an easy journey, though. We're going to have to figure out how to respond to it. That's my take. But I love your putting the fangs back into it here. I think it would have read, it's like when you send an email and you're like, does this read how I think it will read?
Yeah. If I write a blog article saying this, people are going to.
Well, hopefully when people listen to us, they get mad at me for some of what I said rather than you for your fangs here. Cause that's actually a pretty reasonable thing to infer. And if I summed it up for you, you can correct me here. What you're saying is don't just put out a rule and be done. There's more to it in the implementation.
Right, too. And I think part of it, too, is don't believe that you matter now as a security person because the SEC said you have to disclose cybersecurity. Like, there's more to it.
You still don't matter.
Yeah. None of us matter.
Right.
That's
I know I don't. Right?
Yeah. No. I think people want to be taken more seriously, though, at the executive level. And this isn't the rule that does that. Is my opinion.
No rule will do that. It's going to be an ongoing dialogue. It's going to be a growing up, and that doesn't happen because the SEC said thou shalt disclose in 4 days. That's not a thing. Yeah.
That being said, every once a year now,
the
CFO or auditors or your third party tax consultant, whoever does KPMG, whoever is doing your document preparation for your public filings, will come and knock on the CISO's door and say, can we have the program summary that we have to mandatorily include in our filing?
And the EA at that point says, sorry, she's out to lunch today. Yeah, so.
They're out with
she
a vendor.
She said to say no.
Yeah. All right. So there is more responsibility now on the CISO from an executive, from a C-suite perspective. But it's once a year you have to fill out some documents.
And it can be more than that. The audit committee is supposed to be having an ongoing dialogue on a regular basis. Most of us do that.
Yeah, most are.
Good risk review programs are happening, especially in public companies and those that are looking to IPO. But this is happening anyway. It
has nothing to do with what's happening on the legal front right now. This is proper business etiquette for people who do not want to lose their business from a cyber risk.
Right. And we have a tendency to overgeneralize. So what I would say is more companies are doing it better, but that doesn't mean it's good. And I think that's why people are taking steps like this. I would say most companies that are larger or have a significant technology presence have a pretty good cybersecurity program at this point. I think so, at least for people I interact with. It depends on vertical. You're right. I think the word most is a key word there. There's still a few big companies that aren't where they should be. There's still some small companies that are way ahead. Wendy, now they used to call it the security poverty line, right? And so I think it's becoming a bit more blurry and moving down a bit, but we're still not getting enough security service to the lower end of the pyramid. Some verticals aren't getting it, especially outside critical infrastructure, right? And outside of the obvious, like finance and healthcare, municipalities are suffering, right?
Is it? Yeah, terribly. There's security is almost like a middleware right now that doesn't reach the low level or the upper level. It's like does that make sense? Middleware.
I like that.
Right, where it's not taken too seriously when you're actually making a real go-to-market business decision or a acquisition decision. People do due diligence, but have you ever actually heard of someone not acquiring a company because of a cyber finding? I wouldn't know.
I've seen them slow down. That happened with Yahoo, where the value has changed.
Yep.
That was right. So it has. I've seen it have a material effect on the value of a company.
So that's important at the upper level then.
But it's still not the norm. I think it's an important check, just like representations and warranties, just like liabilities, right? It is part of the M&A process and a pretty serious one. And the other thing is, I've seen security gotten wrong in post-merger integration. So people are now much more aware of that. It's how does the CISO take care of 2 domains or more? I was part of a 5-way integration once in an incredible merger. NetScout acquired 4 entities from Danaher Corporation on the same day. And they were managed separately. Arbor was one of them. Yeah. This is not trivial. But then again, IT integration post-merger is also a risk, right? If it takes a year, you can't start using apps and start having people work on things together effectively. If it happens in like a month, that's a whole different ballgame from a business perspective.
Yeah. I mean, technology acquisition or the integration of technology environments is one of the things that's fundamental to getting productivity out of a merger.
Oh yeah, it's like time to oneness. I'm sure there's a real term for that, and right now out there's some banker chuckling at me. But yeah, there's a plan of record, and then there's a time, and the street pays attention to how long it is until you can effectively say, okay, now they're one company.
Right. So there is meaningfulness there then in the upper level of organizations when it comes to certain evaluations. So when you can negotiate a better price for something, and we're talking massive assets that you're negotiating on in M&A, then cybersecurity matters because you get a discount.
And as a CISO, I've had to report out on the state of security across different, like a discontinuous network and application stack and stuff. And it's murder, right? Because that's when people leave. And then you're like, okay, so now I have 2 incident response teams, 2 ways of doing, DevSecOps, like 2 ways of doing patching. God help us. It's terrible.
Yeah, there's no good way to do patching. Never mind having 2.
Yeah, 2 bad ways of doing it. No, thank you. I wrote something on negative trust recently, which was fun. And I wrote about.
I'm not familiar with negative trust in this.
So the principle behind negative trust is we start first of all with your typical IT environment, which is all about maximizing connectivity. Right. So how do you troubleshoot something in IT? Well, you call up your support and they go, did you reboot? Right. That's number 1. Right. And then they go, can you ping it? Right. Number 1 thing, can you ping it? It can open up a shell.
The second thing after that is ICMP allowed?
Is your ICMP open? Are you getting an IP address? Doing that stuff. It's all about connectivity, right? Like can you see stuff. ARP minus it.
Is the cable plugged in?
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Power's on. You've rebooted. Well, there goes half the checklist. Now, open a shell. Can you ping? Right? Yeah. Are you getting an IP address? This is it. Because Metcalfe's law has always told us value is proportional to how many things can connect. So we connect more. How do you make sure that you get less help desk tickets? You make sure things can talk. How do you make sure that you resolve things fast? You open them promiscuously. That sounds kinky, but it's not. You open them promiscuously and you make sure they can connect. This is a maximal trust approach. So what does zero trust say? Right. It says, actually, the principle is least trust. How do you get trust out so that only the things that should connect do? So zero trust is not that there's no trust in the system. It's that only the trust that's needed for the business. Trust. Well, there's that too, right? Trust but verify, not verify but trust, although that's fun. So it's how do you make sure only the trust that's needed for the business is allowed and only when it's allowed? And the word only is key. So we go from a world of IT enabling lots of trust to the business requiring least trust or zero trust. Negative trust is what we do to the bad guys. So if we get into that world, so obviously Zscaler, my company, is all about zero trust. But when we start to put deception in and decoys, what we want is to create decoys in a way that is indistinguishable from the good guys to the bad guys. Ideally, no interruption to the real users, So like identity credentials, files, paths, apps that they would never encounter. But as a bad guy in the environment, they can't tell, is door number 1 or door number 2 the right one?
Right. You have to slowly open doors, hoping there's not a security guard on the other side.
We want them to have shaky trepidation as they reach for the door handle and go, oh my God, if I reach for the wrong one, does it alert the guards? And not just one of 2 doors. How about one of 10,000 doors?
Right. Right.
And in that world, we go from a world where the bad guys just have to get it right once and get through the crunchy exterior to, if they get it wrong once, we catch them at the very minimum. And so that's the world of negative trust that I sort of put out there. And
it's like port knocking.
And yeah, exactly. But I actually think that, okay, I'm going to say the dreaded words or letters, AI. I actually think that things like LLMs can help us name and plant and automate deception better. It might even be a golden age for deception. Not that it's here yet, but the opportunity for applied things like generative AI and LLMs is a great place for it. And I think what we're going to see, and we had Daniel Miessler on the show, right? He has actually talked recently about how attackers are going to get helped first by advances in AI, but later there's far more applicability for defenders. And I totally agree with him. And one of those great places is negative trust. There you go.
Interesting.
It was kind of fun.
Now I know something.
It's going to cost you $5 million to unencrypt all your files. And then the company's sitting there, or the target's sitting there going, it'll also cost me about $5 million to replace them all. Okay, I'm not going to pay you. So then you've got so looking through the lens of the attacker, there's a yield. What percent of people will pay me times the amount that I get?
Right.
Now, a low yield for a high amount, a very low yield, may produce less money than a high yield for a small amount. And operationally, it might be less expensive. So it becomes a margin game. So they started by encrypting home files, and then they went to small businesses, and then they went to larger businesses, and then they started to up the ante and up the ante. And for whatever reason now, we've seen almost 25 new encryptionless ransomware, or at least ransom schemes, hit the world because it's more profitable to skip the cost associated with encryption and the higher demand payment to get a more guaranteed lower payment when you don't involve encryption. So you're saying, pay me and I'm not going to take your IP and I'm not going to out you and I'm not going to damage your customers. You still have a breach, but it will be more contained. Give me this more modest amount, not 5 million, give me 100 grand. I'm gone.
Yeah. It's a reasonable amount of money to make.
Now, word to the wise. If this happens to you, don't do it. And I say that simply because A, you still had a breach.
Well,
B, you're still funding criminals. C, double check with your lawyer because you can go to prison if they're terrorists. Just FYI.
What's the definition of terrorist, though?
I have a degree in counterterrorism, and that is an incredibly complex question to answer.
That's
and it
why
depends on jurisdiction. And you are a mean person, by the way.
A quick thought on that ransomware thing too is the one that people keep forgetting about. And I'm going to write a blog on this one pretty soon. Is if we just use the most simple framework for cybersecurity, which is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Although I focus on 2 things to that, but yes, keep going.
I said the most simple.
Yes, I know you did.
The confidentiality,
non-repudiation, and authenticity. I had to say it. I couldn't help.
Could
it.
Not.
Well,
then we could argue about what is it, the Pexcarian hexad, which adds the additional. But anyway, there's confidentiality and availability, and there's more that people focus on consistently. Very few people spend time saying this is how we're protecting the integrity of our data. And as a threat actor, that is a very easy place to target. I get access. I violate the integrity of data.
It's a phenomenal one, by the way.
I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to exfiltrate. I don't necessarily need to encrypt.
I'm not even going to tell you which numbers I messed with. You go ahead and make your quarterly earnings. You go ahead and try and resolve your accounts at that bank.
Yeah.
I'll hold on to where the errors are.
You wait until the customers start calling your support line saying, this doesn't match.
You try and fix that. I have a full record of everything that I changed, and you can go and undo it. It's just numbers and complexity. But unless you pay me, I'm not giving it to you. I didn't even take a copy of it.
Don't have to. And we spend so little time on integrity.
They still can't prove they didn't, so there's still a breach, by the way, probably. So. That would be great. What a wonderful thing to develop. And I can't believe I'm about to say this horrible idea. If you could have a provable way of messing with integrity while guaranteeing or being able to demonstrate confidentiality is maintained, then you would have, as an attacker, you'd have the ability to ransom someone who doesn't have to say they had a breach. So ouch.
Yes, I know how you could do it too, because
and we're not going to say any more there, and you're not going to patent it because only the bad guys would use it. Although there was this wonderful idea of patenting bad guy techniques so you could take them to court in other jurisdictions where patents applied, but criminal laws didn't.
That's interesting. It seems
right. So you could say, hey, I'm not going after you for busting into that company. I'm going after you for using this patented technique for busting into that company.
Or even better, you could take it another level and just become a patent troll. So you're not the bad guy. You're the bad guy patent troll. So you just own all the patents for
you're the vigilante troll in a weird way.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But by the way, I am required to say I am not a lawyer. Don't do any of this yourself. Don't ever do this.
I don't know if anyone should take any of our advice ever.
Ever. I'm also not a doctor. That's especially important for some things I've said.
I play one on a podcast.
Yes.
Well, thank you for watching. I'm sorry for any advice that you just took from us.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to get somebody on to say all these things. That way it's safer for us.
Maybe we should have a lawyer present at all times.
Let's get a lawyer on here who can advise us on all the things we shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
All right. Until next time.
This is Jacobson.